Before we begin Off the Record, I need to share something important. When federal funding was cut, WKAR lost $1.6 million. Thanks to cost-saving measures and community support, we've closed much of that gap. But we still face a $500,000 shortfall, and we can't finish the job without you. Your financial support keeps programs like Off the Record freely available to everyone in Mid-Michigan. How can you help? Become a sustaining donor today. Already a sustainer? Please consider increasing your monthly contribution. Visit wkar.org/OTR to donate, or click the link in the description. Now, Off the Record.
Welcome back to OTR. The Republican Vice Chair of the House Oversight Committee, Representative Matthew Bierlein, discusses alleged morale problems in the state police. So sit in with us as we get the inside out. Off the Record.
Production of Off the Record is made possible in part by Bellwether Public Relations, a full-service strategic communications agency partnering with clients through public relations, digital marketing, and issue advocacy. Learn more at bellwetherpr.com. And now, this edition of Off the Record with Tim Skubic.
Welcome to Off the Record Studio C on a chilly spring is coming, folks, so hang in there. The Michigan Senate said yes to cell phones. Here's what was going on yesterday. With an overwhelming 34-1 Senate vote, it looks like clear sailing ahead for a 2-year legislative effort to take cell phones out of the hands of all public school students, grades K through 12, except when they are in the classroom. The devices are permitted at lunchtime and in between classes. The House Republican sponsor wanted a bell-to-bell law that would ban cell phones from the beginning to the end of the school day. But in order to get Senate votes, Representative Tisdale compromised. That was an example of bipartisan cooperation, as Democratic Senator Paul Hankey worked with Mr. Tisdale to move this along successfully.
If this bill package passes today, we will have passed 2 very solid school policy bills in the past month, indicating that, yes, we can come together across the aisle and across chambers to do the right things for kids, parents, and schools.
In the wake of the Oxford school student deaths, many parents told lawmakers they wanted their children to have access to their phones in the midst of another possible shooting. Senator Paul Hankey notes that those protections are in this bill. Plus, if schools want to go further, they can.
These bills reflect the minimum that schools must implement regarding school cell phone use, but schools can implement more strict policies if they so choose.
The House Speaker Matt Hall is behind this effort, and all the key players point to success in the end, sending the package to the governor, and she has indicated her support. If so, starting next school year, kids can take their cells to school, but in the classroom, it's a no-no. All right, Beth, what'd you make of this?
Well, I mean, it was bipartisan cooperation to start out the year.
Ka-ching.
Yeah, we'll see if it ends there or if it continues, but it's going to be an uphill climb from here because we are in an election year and we are in a stiffly divided House and Senate right now.
This was a no-brainer, was it not?
There was some resistance from some corners, especially parents who have concerns about the current state of security in our public schools. They're worried that, should an emergency happen, they want to be able to get in contact with their children, even though that might not be the safest thing for their kids to be doing, which is texting their mom and dad in the midst of, say, a security incident, right? And I think that there was also some disagreement about whether or not the onus should be on school boards to have to implement the particulars of this policy as well.
Well, there was also a school of thought that says, let the school districts decide this on their own. Well, if that was the case, nobody would have done squat.
Right. I mean, what there was is sort of the pressure campaign of the legislature doing it, so then school officials can say, look, we're just following the law.
We had no choice.
Look, this is, to Beth's point, this is a early win, but I'm thinking about last year, and I throw myself under the bus for this too, when there was sort of the early bipartisan compromise over minimum wage and paid sick time, and we were like, oh my gosh, divided Lansing can work together and still get things done. And very quickly, we found out that was not necessarily the case, with the legislature passing the fewest number of bills sort of on record. So we'll see. I think, to Beth's point, we are now leading into just a tremendously huge election year, and we'll see how much more bipartisan compromise there really can be.
Well, you know what? If both parties are smart, okay, and we're about to find that out, working and getting stuff done for the people to go back home and say, we did something for you, is that not a ticket to re-election?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. And
well, then what's
so Tim, I spoke with
yes,
both
Zoe.
Speaker, Poopsie. I spoke with both Speaker of the House, Matt Hall, and Senate Majority Leader Winnie Brinks, and both of them have this this idea that they want to work together. It's the actual makings of what does that look like. And we asked the Speaker exactly that vis-a-vis about the budget, right? He would not promise on our show that a budget will get done on time. And I said, that can't be a good thing for your members to be out in, September without a budget done, knocking on doors and having a repeat of what happened last year.
And I think it's also important to point out that the bipartisan compromise making that happened here wasn't driven top down. This wasn't like leadership coordinated. It wasn't Matt Hall, Winnie Brinks getting in a room and working together. It was the co-sponsors of this legislation in each chamber deciding what the compromise should be. So I don't think it's necessarily, while they're getting sort of maybe perhaps the easiest numbers off their docket first, I don't know if it's indicative of where the relationship is at.
The senator and Representative Tisdale Dell certainly deserve some cooperation awards for working together, because they were not always on the same page. There was a little niffy gnawing going on there, but they put those differences aside and came up with a solution.
100%, especially after last year with the sort of machinations. Remember, it got put up on the board and then no Democrats decided to vote for it because it was a Republican bill, to come back out so quickly in the new year and get it done. What I think will be really interesting to see, too, is how the governor frames this in her State of the State. This, of course, was one of the things that she talked about wanting to get done in last year's State of the State speech. I mean, Rick Pluto was talking about, does she just decide to do something just very sort of almost Trumponian and sign the bill, at the dais during the speech? See, this is what can happen when we get things done.
Well, she starts with a big thank you. Huh?
I think it should be noted, too, Tim, you said this is sort of common sense, right? Like that a lot of different states have passed this. This took 3 years to get through.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was a quick start to the year of passing this, but it took a long time to get there. This didn't happen overnight, and I don't know, there are a lot of policies out there that may take equal amounts of time.
Let me just put that in perspective. Years ago, when they were working on property tax, it only took 20 years. So, 3 years looks pretty good, what I'm saying?
It's all relative.
Fixing the damn roads.
It's all in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah.
Speaking of the eye of the beholder, John James has some ads run by Republicans against him because he's not loyal to Donald Trump. Goodness gracious.
Well, allegedly by Republicans, right? This is a no-name 501c4 group registered in December, but while there is some sort of connections to Republican groups, there is obfuscation of sort of the motive here, whether there's somebody waiting in the wings in terms of Republican candidates, the Detroit News reported, or someone who's already in the race looking to sort of disrupt these candidates and looking to have an in or a lane in this primary, where John James is the noted frontrunner, I think remains to be seen. I mean, basically they're blaming him for deciding to leave Congress in a swing district to run for governor, and saying that this is essentially going against the president and his wishes.
And he responded with an ad that said, I love Donald Trump. Well, what did he say?
He said what you said. That was pretty much the message of it. But what I think is interesting, and perhaps shouldn't be anymore, but it still is to me, is that we're here campaigning to Donald Trump, right? Like, it's not really a campaign for voters just yet. It's a campaign for his endorsement. And I think nothing spoke more to that than, earlier this week, Speaker Matt Hall during a press conference was asked, are you going to endorse in the governor's race? And he said, I'll wait until after Trump does. So you're going to wait until after a federal leader endorses in the race, when you probably know that person better because you live in the state. I think it just speaks to the nature of elections right now in the state, that a lot of them are based on federal dynamics.
But you had the specter of Mr. Zuba on the program last week saying, if you have a Trump endorsement and you're a Republican running in a general election, what did he say?
Right. I mean, this is the issue. There's a difference between the primary electorate and the general electorate in Michigan. There is. And we should also note here in Michigan, and this is similar throughout the country, when Trump is not at the top of the ballot, right, Republicans just do not do as well.
This John James thing, this story's not over yet.
Well, I mean, we've got until August, friend. So I think you're right.
And I think what is so interesting to me about these races right now is, of course, you have the infighting ahead of the primaries, the reorganization, even on the Democratic side with Garland Gilchrist stepping down to the Secretary of State's race. You've got this infighting over James. And then you have a third party thrown into this of Mike Duggan. And you know, allegations on social media after those ads came out about who orchestrated it and who's to blame for it. And Duggan got pulled into it. And I think it complicates this dynamic even more in Michigan, and it's hard to see how everything's going to settle.
How did they yank him into that?
They claimed, I think, that somehow it was connected to Duggan, or that I can't remember that
a funder or someone who has worked for or sort of fundraised for Duggan was one of the names possibly that was helping to put together these ads. I do want to say with the Duggan name though, like Beth is just 100% right, and I don't mean that like all of us are sitting around salivating, but like this is insane. Like the Duggan running as an independent is going to completely upend what is a normal race. And I mean, again, talking to Matt Hall just this week, he was going on and on about how well he works with Duggan and how much they can work together, enough so that, again, my co-host Rick Pluta said, well, are you going to endorse him? Like it was that kind.
No, but he wants to do well enough so that the Democrats can't get the governorship. I mean, that's what's going on there, right? It's not that he likes Duggan. He likes the idea that Duggan sucks support away from the D's.
Well, and he said just that he thinks that's what's going to happen. But if you're talking again about Richard Schuba's polling, I mean, what he says is it's not as big of a draw, that there could even be, really what Schuba says is independents are going to make or break this race, and that you've got about 20% of folks who at any given point could look at Duggan and go, you know what, a plague on both their houses.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the fundamental thing is that for Duggan to have a lane of victory, he needs messy primaries. And on the Democratic side, with Gilchrist, as Beth noted, moving to the Secretary of State's race, that clears a lane for her. She has one opponent in Genesee County Sheriff Chris Swanson. And so while that's about to become less messy and less of a contest, he wants to see infighting in both of these primaries. And I mean, while he has to go for these independents, we have an unpopular president in the White House right now enforcing the frontrunner, who's skipping, mind you, party-hosted debates, primary debates among his competitors to run, that, you know, forcing him to defend an unpopular president and his allegiance to this and defense of that person, I think plays to the favor of both Democrats and Mike Duggan.
And the other thing, the legislature not getting a budget done on time is an in-kind contribution to Mike Duggan's campaign.
Absolutely.
Because what he used all last year, right, is look, Lansing is broken, lawmakers can't do this. He can do that exact same thing again, depending on what Lansing does or does not get done this year.
But what the Republicans are hoping for is that the big package that cleared will turn the economy around as we move deeper into this year. And they point to the gasoline prices. Okay, I can't remember the last time I paid $2.85 a gallon for gas, boys and girls. So they got their fingers crossed that the things will look rosier as we move down the line. But you're right, Mr. Duggan takes all of the tea leaves that we used to read accurately. Forget it.
Exactly.
Throw out the playbook.
Exactly.
All right, let's call in this guest today who's going to talk about the Michigan State Police and the problems over there. Representative, welcome to Off the Record. Nice to have you on board on this chilly morning. Let's start out with a due process question. If you were the state police director and you knew that the House committee was looking at what you were doing and interviewing people privately, wouldn't you sort of hope that at some point you might call him up to respond to what those folks said? And you did not, correct?
Well, he did have an hour and a half of joint testimony.
Yeah, but that was way before this report came out, sir.
It was during the process of investigating. He knew about the depositions. He was made aware of those. He knew what was going on. The report just came out, so not to say that he won't come back to answer. I don't know if he wants to come back and answer.
So if he said, let me come in and talk to you folks, you'll welcome him in?
I believe that. I think the chair would absolutely welcome him in. I think there's more questions to be answered as a result of what came out in the report.
But you haven't already concluded that he's guilty of sin.
I think his troopers concluded that he's guilty of sin in their assessment of the job that he's doing and the confidence they have in him. But that's their decision. I think the report speaks a lot about the leadership at MSP.
What would you say to sort of arguments that institutional cultures in large organizations are difficult to change, and that if you come in with a reform mindset, that means that you're always going to hit resistance in people who are, would prefer things to stay the way they are?
Change is hard. I think we see it at every level. At something like a law enforcement agency, change shouldn't ever be fast. There's reasons, even the legislative process, like it's supposed to go slow for a reason. We need to be deliberative. We need to make sure that what we're doing is accurate and correct. We have good information. I think at a police agency, or any kind of command structure agency like that, it should go slow. People do resist change, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're resisting just because it's change. The things that came out in deposition, the reports through the employee process, both the report that the troopers did themselves, and then the one that's the actual state survey that they conduct on employee satisfaction. They said the same things. There was a lot of repetitiveness, that people fear retaliation for even just speaking up. That's a lack of leadership. That's not we're resistant to change. It's I'm afraid that I'm going to lose my job because I disagree with the way things are headed.
What would you like to see happen next?
Lieutenant Colonel retired,
yes,
or announced
retirement.
retirement. I don't know if that's the right step for the colonel. But I think him and the governor should have a real conversation about the results of this. He answers to her, and the state depends on the state police. Every law enforcement agency in the state depends on the state police to be professional, to conduct themselves at the highest level. And if the troopers themselves don't have confidence in that leadership, how should the local sheriff's department have confidence in that?
What would you like to see happen?
What would I like to see happen? I'd like answers to the results of this report. I think the colonel should come back into oversight and explain how do these statements come about? How do your staff, the people that answer to you, say that we are afraid to speak out? We don't understand the decisions that you make. We don't understand how someone who had multiple violations was almost put on a probation where she couldn't have a promotion in 2 years, and then right after that 2-year period is over, she becomes the second highest ranking person in the organization. Like, how does that happen? What drives that decision? Mm-hmm. And I think that's what the membership, and especially the middle management level, really wants to know. How does that happen?
We're getting to the end of the Whitmer administration. She has a year left. Arguably, the next governor is going to put a new state police commander in. Is there an argument to just keeping Colonel Grady in his spot because a change would be too disruptive at this point with just a year left?
Yeah, I don't think so. Is it ever too late to make a change? I don't think that's the case. I agree. Whoever the next governor is, they're going to come in, and you're probably going to see mass department head changes. That's pretty typical. But if you have a known problem, I don't think that it's, well, let's just wait. We can afford to wait another year. I want to, if I can remember correctly from the testimony, 500 vacant trooper positions. Can we wait another year to start addressing that issue? I don't think we can. And if there's no confidence from the current troopers, how are we going to recruit new ones?
Who's your candidate for governor?
I was ready for that question.
Oh, darn. Okay, let me withdraw it.
So for me, it's, we were talking a little bit earlier about how I got started in volunteering and things. The first time I worked on a statewide campaign, it was Mike Cox for governor in 2010.
Wow.
Tom Leonard is one of my best friends in the world, and I go hunting with Eric Nesbitt.
I know where this is going.
Right. So
You do realize you'll have to vote for one of them
I'm
or
gonna
not
have
vote
to.
at all.
I'm gonna have to vote for one of them, but
There isn't a D,
I
all of the
certainly,
above.
I certainly don't plan to endorse anybody. I think you do this long enough, and like you're legitimately friends with these people. And when I go into the voting box, like every citizen, I get to make my vote, but
Should it
I don't
matter
have to.
who Donald Trump endorses? You heard us talking earlier.
Yeah, I think the president gets to make whatever decisions he wants, but that doesn't have to affect mine. I think, I know all these people on a personal level. I think they all have strengths and they all have probably some weaknesses, and I'm going to pick who I think is going to do the best job, and that doesn't necessarily have to be who the president thinks is going to do the best job.
I noticed that you didn't use John James' name in there.
He's the person I know the least. I really don't know him. I know the other people on a personal level. I could pick him up the phone and call him. And
so as a student of politics, what did you think of his decision to run for governor and not hang on to that seat, which the president said we need to keep control?
Political decisions are hard. You have to do what's best for you, what's best for your family, and I think hasn't that always been probably John James's plan? It was to eventually be able to run for that governor's seat.
So
I think that's been a long-term goal.
You don't think it was selfish?
I don't. You have to do what's best for you. If my wife
Isn't
says,
that by definition a selfish
well, but
decision?
you have to do what's best for your. Let's put it this way. He has a young family. He's in Washington D.C. 3 to 4 days a week, flying back and
Okay,
forth.
but he ran for Senate twice, so
He did.
I don't know.
Absolutely. I did. But I think even we run for these offices, and then we get down here, and it's a stress level that you don't necessarily. You think you know what you're getting into, but maybe you get down here and that travel, that back and forth, you start missing sporting events, you're missing ballet class, whatever it is. You have to start making decisions.
Maybe I can offer you an out here by going back to the topic of the MSP report. I'm curious, to the extent to which the House Oversight Committee has demonstrated that there's a controversy here, that there's some substance to the allegations against him of workplace issues, Colonel Grady that is. This was sort of a slow rolling issue. I think some of the allegations of incidents, insular culture, personnel complaints, these go back more than 5 years. What do you think it says about the oversight performance of the legislature in prior sessions up until now that it took an outside agency conducting a survey of troopers and commanding officers to finally bring to light and flag for people that there was perhaps an issue here?
I think that's fair. In the previous term, this is my second term, so in my first term, I don't think oversight and ethics met maybe a couple times over a 2-year period to review these kinds of things.
But some of these complaints also happened under Republican oversight as well.
Yeah, and that should be addressed. I don't think we shouldn't just say, well, we're forgetting about what happened in the past, right? If we have deficiencies, we need to correct those deficiencies. So as a legislative body, if we can do better, we should. I think the current oversight process is working. It's been pretty bipartisan in the way that the committee's reacted. It hasn't been, most of the votes for subpoena or bringing people in or asking for documents have been bipartisan, maybe one dissenter, maybe not.
How do you find out that there's issues in state agencies as an oversight committee outside of waiting for the results of union surveys?
So when we first started this last year, we put together a website that people could email in and send in their complaints with state government. Hundreds and hundreds of emails. Start looking through, are there common themes in some of them? There was, I think one of the first things we talked about was Eagle and Eagle overreach and how it was affecting business and farms. Those were generated from our constituents calling in saying they had these problems and that website process. And so it gave us direction to say, okay, it looks like there maybe is a problem here. Let's start asking questions and investigate.
Representative, I think you're one of the reps, correct, who's publicly said that you're unhappy with the unilateral cut of $645 million of work projects that was cut late last year, a surprise to many, something that we just really have not seen in Lansing in recent memory. What's the plan to fix this? I mean, you're unhappy about it. What are you going to do about it for your district? And the fact that you're running for Senate, of course.
Yeah, well, so I was unhappy about it because it's just, I think I've expressed this a little bit more of I'd rather use a scalpel than a hammer kind of person. I think we could have done better in the way that it was implemented. I don't agree with everything that was cut, but I think there were some probably things that should be reevaluated. I mean, I think that's the bigger question that we get to ask from all of this is if we had that money that was appropriated to be spent in 25 and it wasn't, why wasn't it? If it's a grant program, why did only $2 million of the $20 million get spent? Is it because we overfunded it, or is it because the state's bureaucracy makes it so hard to access those funds that they're not being utilized? So I think it gives us a really good opportunity to reevaluate how we're distributing funds and where those dollars are going. I don't have to like something to still try to find the positive move forward with it.
Representative, would you call yourself, like, in relative to the rest of your caucus, would you call yourself a centrist?
No, I just think I can find we're in a divided government. I can't do very little things can get done unilaterally or just with one party. And so trying to concentrate on the things that we can do instead of the things that maybe, I'll throw it out there. I'm not a big, I would love to see our zoning restored to the locals on solar and wind siting, right? That's not gonna happen. So what can I work on? What things can we do that we can get across the finish line? Maybe a little bit more willingness to try that instead of just, well, I'm gonna pound this very Republican idea that's not gonna get done. But I wouldn't see myself as a centrist.
Why do you want to leave the House?
It's more about wanting to help take over the Senate. I think that's the way that we're gonna be able to get things like solar and wind siting fixed. The district that I'm running in is a district I know really well. It's a big piece of my current House district. I've lived and worked there my whole life. Both professionally and personally, I have connections in the entire area, and I know the people. It's a good district. It's very similar to the one I currently represent.
Let's be clear here. You learned at the need of Roger Kahn, right?
Yeah.
He was an irascible player on both sides, correct?
He was.
He had a little bit of you in him, or vice versa.
There's opportunity to do work. And I think taking that opportunity and making good change is totally acceptable. You have to work in the constraints you're given.
So in other words, you're not about to join the Freedom Caucus in the House.
I don't think they'd take me.
That perhaps is true. Representative, good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Nice to have you on board. See you right here for more Off the Record next week. Stay tuned.
Production of Off the Record is made possible in part by Bellwether Public Relations, a full-service strategic communications agency partnering with clients through public relations, digital marketing, and issue advocacy. Learn more at bellwetherpr.com. For more Off the Record, visit WKAR.org. Michigan public television stations have contributed to the production costs of Off the Record.